Okay, welcome everybody to this webinar on positive behaviour support and deafblindness. My name is Meredith Prain. I'm the Project Manager of Deafblind Information Australia. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting here today on Aboriginal lands, and this land was never ceded. And I'd like to pay respect to elders, past and present, and welcome any Aboriginal people joining us today. It's my really great pleasure to hand you over to the capable hands of Kaylee Devine, who is the clinical team lead for positive behaviour support at Senses WA. It's great to see so many people and the great interest in this important topic. So over to you, Kaylee.
Thank you, Meredith. Hi, everybody. My name's Kaylee. As Meredith said, I'm the team lead for positive behaviour support with Census WA. I've worked in the industry for approximately 12 years, and I have a great passion for working with the people of the deafblind community. We'll get started. So as Meredith has done the acknowledgement of country, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land of which I am presenting from today, being the Whadjuk people of Perth. I'd like to also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So I'd just like to make an acknowledgement here. The information in this webinar references NDIS PBS framework and WA regulated restrictive practice guidelines. So please ensure that you access your local restrictive practice guidelines to ensure that you're compliant within your state. So looking at the learning outcomes for today, by the end of this session, you'll be able to define what positive behaviour support is and its key principles. You'll be able to explain how positive behaviour support supports individuals who are deafblind, recognise the role of rapport building in effective positive behaviour support, identify underlying needs and their impact on behaviour, and apply proactive strategies that respect individual communication methods. So we've got a lot to cover today. We're just going to start, though, with an explanation of some terms which we might come across. We're starting with meaningful engagement. So this is any activity that provides someone a sense of purpose. It solidifies their identity and promotes that feeling of satisfaction and well-being. I might also use the term executive function. For this, I'm addressing the cognitive processes that help with planning, decision-making, problem-solving, and emotional regulation. These can be impacted by deafblindness and stress. We'll also be looking at co-regulation. So this is the support provided to help an individual to regulate their emotions. I'll be going into underlying needs. So these are the fundamental physical, emotional, and social needs that influence our behaviour. Also, the term that everybody knows best is that behaviours of concern. So these are the behaviours that individuals may use consistently to communicate unmet needs or distress. And lastly, we have restrictive practices. So these are interventions that limit a person's rights or freedom of movement. They can come in many, many forms. Capable environments. So these are environments and supports that are adapted to meet somebody's needs. And function-based strategies. This is how we meet the need behind the behaviour. So let's start by exploring what PBS actually means and why it matters in the context of deafblindness. So positive behaviour support is an evidence-based, person-centred approach that improves quality of life by understanding and addressing the underlying causes of behaviours of concern. It is a proactive approach that focuses on skill building, environmental adjustments, and developing effective strategies in collaboration with individuals, their families, their support teams, and any other important people in their life. Positive behaviour support promotes independence, well-being, and dignity while reducing the need for restrictive practices. So why does this matter for people with deafblindness? So people living with deafblindness might use behaviours of concern to communicate unmet needs, discomfort, or distress. Behaviours can be repetitive, harming to self, to others, and to property. Empowering people to be heard and included in their own lives is essential to supporting them to achieve a good quality of life. Providing support to a person and others to recognise the person's early warning signs and to understand the function behind their behaviours helps PBS practitioners guide the development of effective strategies. It is important to understand that positive behaviour support is not a quick fix, but it is very beneficial. So when we're looking at PBS, we're considering choice, control, connection, and a sense of safety. And this is fostered most effectively through person-centered support and meaningful engagement for a person living with deafblindness. When we meet people and their families or support system, it's not uncommon to find a group of people that are pretty tired, they've tried a lot of different things, and they may be feeling a little stressed and under pressure. As a PBS practitioner, our job is to view their experiences and validate them through the lens of good PBS. So this includes a person-centered strengths-based approach. We strive to collaborate and co-design any strategies and plans which need to be implemented. It prioritizes quality of life. There's proactive function-based strategies, not just reactive, and it focuses on creating capable environments. So common supports from a PBS lens. So PBS practitioners like to work closely with allied health professionals on the importance of meeting a person where they're at. We can do this through focusing on the value of communication interaction. And this might mean supporting staff to upskill in keyword sign, Auslan, understand the value of intensive interaction, and understand that communication comes in all forms, such as objects of reference, facial expressions, body language. It can be something as simple as the color of somebody's skin, the tension in their muscles at any given time. We also might look at strategies of using hand under hand or hand over hand approaches to supporting a client to build their skills. This is important to encourage the individual to be part of their own life and provide them with opportunities to develop and understand processes behind a cup of tea appearing in their hand or how to brush their own teeth. Those simple things that we take for granted, it's important that we involve people in their lives rather than doing to. We do with. We also look into we try to encourage people to look at the importance of positioning and tactile engagement. This supports a sense of safety, orientation, and connectedness for the person living with deafblindness. And understanding environmental accommodations. So by increasing access to preferred activities and sensory experiences and adding new sensory experiences to an individual's day, we're giving them more information and consistency of feedback to be able to support their connectedness with the world around them. It's important that individuals that's supporting a person with deafblindness understand that we are their conduit to understanding their world. And that's where that sense of safety comes from. So moving on to underlying needs, positive behaviour support and deafblindness. When we think about underlying needs, we're talking about understanding that we want to understand the why behind our actions. So an underlying need explains the why behind our actions. These needs are universal, but life experiences and diagnosis can also influence how they're expressed and met. We need to consider an individual's internal and external needs when identifying unmet needs. It's important to understand that everybody experiences these needs differently and may have identified strengths and challenges in meeting each of these needs. Understanding a person's needs can help us better understand the why behind the use of the behaviours that have been developed. Supporting a person to meet their underlying needs through meaningful engagement, honouring their communication method, supported integration in emotional and sensory needs, and addressing any health concerns, something as simple as even a good quality sleep, is very likely to support them to have a good life. Some examples of where we may need to adjust to somebody's underlying needs might be where somebody might be trialing a new medication which causes a bit of drowsiness, maybe impacts their capacity for problem solving, or somebody who requires movement to regulate themselves, and that access to movement is challenged. These are the things that we need to consider, and we need to understand that underlying needs may be dictated by the person's diagnosis, but they can be changed by life experience on any given day. The considerations for meeting underlying needs is we need to look at individualized, proactive and reactive strategies. So we might look at reactive strategies that play an important role in helping people feel safe and reduce risk during moments of distress and vulnerability. However, effective PBS is found in the proactive space. So implementing approaches that meet underlying needs in a proactive way may likely result in an individual being less likely to engage in their go-to behaviours of concern. We'll look into identifying sensory preferences. So in this way, we can support individuals to identify their sensory preferences and meet them in a way that works best for them. We look at prioritising predictability and rapport building. So predictable routines, staffing, communication approaches all foster a sense of safety, which may enable individuals to try new things and cope with unplanned change. And also access to information. A person's opportunities for learning and access to language and the transparency and frequency and information quality provided can impact their perception on their world, their independent living skills, mental health, and capacity to engage with others safely. Communication partners are required to provide access to true and accurate information, and this is a great responsibility. And with lack of resources or skilled staff, lack of resources or skilled staff can result in a high risk to power imbalance and unintentional coercive control. So other considerations for meeting unmet needs. We look at environmental setup for setting the person up for success. So we think about things like clear spatial layouts and sensory-friendly environments to reduce stress and promote a person's independence in their space. We look at the importance of exploration and collaboration. So quality of life, choice and control, and environmental adaptation, meaning the role of the family support team, medical professionals, allied health professionals, and positive behaviour support, all support that good quality of life. And a big thing to actually consider here is the organisational policies from a deafblind lens. So when we're working with support providers, we might actually find quite often that policies in place do not necessarily lean to the needs of a person living with deafblindness. So deafblind cultural values often challenge standard organisational approaches to a client or staff engagement and incident management. So additional considerations need to be made regarding the quality of support, communication, safety and engagement to ensure staff are able to meet a person's needs. One thing that I can think of there would be the equivalent of eye contact would be that hip and shoulder engagement, which may not be appropriate with working with some people, but for somebody living with deafblindness, that's vital in some cases. Another might be in incident management. You may have a client that you're working with and they're asking for additional information that can be perceived as looking to hit somebody, dependent on how distressed that person might be. But for a confident person, they understand the positioning required to be able to attempt to give information whilst keeping themselves safe and also the person safe. This is very case by case. And the last thing that we look at is restrictive practice from the deafblind lens. We keep a very close observation from the person's basic human rights. This is a priority when reviewing potential regulated restrictive practices or high-risk practices. Practitioners should consider sensory, language, and information access as well as deprivation. A deeper understanding of a person's capacity, choices, barriers to access, and safety is essential when exploring restrictive practices. People that live deafblind plus often benefit from increased co-regulation, predictable routines and preferred activities which meet their sensory needs and provide opportunities for processing information. Given the complexity in supporting a person with deafblindness to access and understand their world, traditional support strategies may actually not be as effective. Working in the deafblind space, we may need to consider strategies that meet a person's underlying needs, which would be considered contradictory, restrictive in comparison to approaches used for those without a similar condition. Having deeper understanding of an individual's personal preferences, diagnoses, strengths, and challenges as a person living with deafblindness is vital in supporting them to develop effective strategies and ensure that they remain as the expert in their own lives. A good example of this may be considerations regarding an unexpected change and multiple environments. Working in the deafblind space, we may intentionally limit environmental variation by maintaining consistent routines, support workers, unplanned community access, and times of interaction. From a non-deafblind perspective, this approach could be considered overly restrictive. However, what may appear as restriction actually functions as a replacement for missing sensory information, supports emotional regulation, that sense of safety, and communication. A solid foundation of predictability may in fact improve an individual's capacity to explore new activities and adapt easier to unplanned change. So a good example of this, which is super simple, might be taking a client home for lunch in the middle of every day to support orientation to time. So I'm going to move on to the importance of rapport building for effective PBS. So rapport building is key in fostering a sense of safety and gaining a clear understanding of a person's strengths, needs, and desires. Strong rapport reduces risk to both the client and their support system by increasing the likelihood of effective PBS engagement. Individuals living with deafblindness face an increased risk of isolation, which can affect their mental health, independence, and capacity to engage with others. Their opportunities to access and understand their world and their extended world around them is heavily reliant on the information provided by their communication partners. Some strategies we might consider for good rapport building would look at presence in action. So the consistency of presence being preparation of self using personal identifiers, a consistent approach, the same shampoo, the same perfume, whatever that identifier is for you, being you. Being comfortable sitting in silence. And modelling behaviour is powerful when people have experienced disengagement and staff turnover. So being that consistent person in somebody's life in a consistent manner. Sometimes when people might become quite distressed, they might experience a lot of high staff turnover, which can reinforce that sense, that lack of safety in their lives. So being that person, being able to accept what the day before was rough, leaving that at the door and coming in consistently with a consistent approach the next day is pretty vital when working with people living with deafblindness. We're coming back to collaboration. So collaboration with your person, their family, and the support system is very, very important. And going back to understanding that your client is the expert in their own life, so is their families. And working with them to identify what works, what doesn't work, what they want to work towards is important. And remembering that your perception of what a good life looks like for them might be very different. We also like to encourage honouring a person's communication approach. So taking the time to learn how a person communicates and implementing strategies during engagement is key. With support using approaches such as intensive interaction, the Hangout program, and video interaction guidance, this can be improved. Support empowerment of that engagement and building that solid rapport with the individual. It comes down to those simple conversations, which aren't conversations at all. It's acknowledging a laugh or a smile, or even seeing someone cry. I can see you're crying, or I can see you're frowning. It's those conversations outside of everyday support. We're also connecting through preferred topics and interests and activities. So it's our job as the person supporting the person living with deafblindness to maintain flexibility in our approach. As PBS practitioners, this is what we do. We maintain flexibility and have a curious mind. We are willing to learn about a client's special interests in order to encourage connection in a manner which feels safe and comfortable for that individual. This goes for support workers too, family members, and key people in that person's life. We want to understand the individual's needs. So we need to take time and be curious to learn about the person, their underlying and unmet needs. We want to get to know a person's individual communication style, including verbal and non-verbal cues. And also we need to acknowledge a person's past experiences. People with deafblindness often develop adaptive and maladaptive behaviours in response to unexpected change, inconsistent supports, information deprivation, and lack of engagement. Acknowledging a person's past experiences, consider how these experiences impact their quality of life and capacity to meet their underlying needs, supports us to be able to work with them to develop strategies to support a good life. It also supports us to know when to validate, to regularly check in with the person, have those curious conversations, and acknowledge communication outside of the support needs, as we spoke about earlier. So common behaviours and their functions. So understanding the function of behaviour is key to understanding how that behaviour developed and what their person's trying to communicate. So in positive behaviour support, we recognise that all behaviour is communication. As PBS practitioners, we understand that individuals may use behaviours of concern to communicate something that is not quite right or is missing in their life. The focus is not on the behaviour rather than the why someone may use a behaviour to express their wants and needs. We recognise that behaviours occur for a reason and is part of an interaction between the individual and other people in their environment. Understanding the function of an individual's behaviour supports PBS practitioners to take a holistic view in collaboration with individuals and their key supports to identify functionally equivalent replacement behaviours, which may equally meet the need of the behaviour in a safe manner, and develop and trial strategies to meet their underlying unmet needs. So some commonly identified behaviours we might see would be harm to self. So this could be physical harm to self, so head banging, biting, pinching self. This could be meeting a sensory need. It could be a response to pain and discomfort or orientation and overwhelm. For example, a person who might bang their heads against fixed objects in response to a migraine. Property damage. So this may occur out of fear, not feeling heard, or as a communication tool. We've got over-reliance on prompting and over-compliance. This is a curious behaviour. The potentially developed as a sense of security, predictability of routine, and orientation of items. Over-reliance and reduction in independence is something commonly seen in environments with high staff turnover and unskilled supports. We might see sexualized behaviour, like masturbation, and this could be harmful to self, or it could be a challenge in public spaces. This can be meeting a sensory need in response to distress, as well as meeting an underlying need. For an individual, masturbation is one of those few self-regulation strategies that they can do independently. This can become a behaviour of concern where it results in harm to self or is performed in public spaces. We also might see physical behaviours such as sitting down for extended periods of time. The sitting down for long periods of time is an independent action which may provide a sense of control for an individual. It can also be the case that this behaviour is developed by clients that are prompt dependent. Excuse me. We might see physical behaviour towards others. We see these things as communication and fear-based behaviours. This is a curious behaviour which, with intent, is often out of fear and communication, or alternatively accidental, where an individual is looking for tactile communication. So what I referred to before with someone who's seeking hand over underhand support, we might see the classic gesture such as this. But with distress, you might find that that gets a bit too much, which could end up with a bop on the head. Sometimes we see loud and prolonged vocalization beyond communication. And lastly, communication refusal. So where somebody might close their eyes or not allow others to touch their hands when they're upset. So when we think about behaviour, we also need to be considering what's happening in the body. Sometimes behaviours might the unmet need for the behaviour might actually be an internal need. So pain behaviours in themselves, for a person who has not had the opportunity to witness modelled behaviour, it can be very difficult to identify. Individuals may use established and emerging behaviours or presentations to express or attempts to relieve or escape pain and discomfort. In PBS, we prioritise improving a person's quality of life, and this can include protocols around pain and discomfort, which include a non-verbal pain scale such as the ABI, regular GP appointments, testing for urinary tract infections, and having PRN pain relief on hand. And lastly, we're going to move into the vital role of information gathering. Anyone who's worked with a PBS practitioner will know that we enjoy some good data collection. It's not that we enjoy it, it just gives us a lot of information that supports us to support you well. So why collect information? Well, this helps us identify patterns in somebody's behaviour and identify their unmet needs. In this way, we can determine whether something's happening only in the morning, only just before bed, or with specific staff members. It could also be, for ladies, but along the line of their menstrual cycle. It could be something around a medical device which is causing pain. This data collection can give us the information that we need to be able to determine what's happening, which need is not being met right now. It also gives us the information that we need to develop trial strategies with people and their families for implementation, and monitor the effectiveness and adjust strategies when required. This information can be collected through recording sheets, through interview. It's a robust feedback cycle can really benefit the PBS experience for a family, and it can set the client up for success. So from a client, staff, and family perspective, their role in this is to understand, just as we do, that the individual is their own expert in their life. For us, we would love all of the feedback and observations that somebody is willing to give us, and to share their own insights on what works and what doesn't work. No piece of information is too small, and it might seem insignificant to you, but for us, it's very important for us to be able to understand what's happening for that person. From a PBS perspective, practitioner perspective, our job is to look through that PBS lens, that proactive lens. We need to maintain curiosity, so we call ourselves detectives. We need to wonder, we need to reflect. Our job is not to make blanket statements, it is to be endlessly curious about what's happening for the person themselves, what's happening in the system, and why things are working and why things aren't working in different environments. Our job is to interpret the data that is provided to us and identify any themes that we might see, and support strategy development across environments. So this means that we'll want to develop strategies which can be implemented consistently across school, in the home space, in the workspace, in the cell environment, at the GP, and in all five calls. Wherever the person goes, we like to develop strategies which will support that person to have that feeling of safety, connectedness, and control in their lives, so that they can live their life to the fullest, the way that they want to. All right, so in summary, through the PBS lens, all behaviour is communication. The PBS framework supports individuals, families, and support teams to uphold an individual's basic human rights, feel heard, and improve their quality of life. Communication and access to information is almost always the key to supporting individuals to feel safe and have a good life. And individuals living with deaf blindness are more likely to experience accidental language and information deprivation, isolation, power imbalance, and coercive control. Rapport building and collaboration are key to effective outcomes. And the person with deaf blindness is the expert in their own life. We just need to learn their language.